Let's talk a little bit today about discernment. Now, for those of you who are involved in secular religion, you already have an idea of what discernment is. That's basically a way of spiritually investigating things, analyzing things through spirit. It's that little voice. It's that first choice. It's that initial gut feeling. That's what discernment is. And a lot of us are so wrapped up in the material world that we have just thrown discernment to the wayside. And that could be a dangerous thing because you could wind up in a world of hurt. You could choose the wrong mate because you didn't use discernment. You could make the wrong financial decisions that will destroy your family due to lack of discernment. You could wind up making the wrong career choice. The list goes on and on and on. And I hear people say all the time, and this is a phrase that I was brought up with as well, that, God works in mysterious ways. And that is true. And one of those ways could be a split-second whisper in the ear, a split-second nudge not to do something, and that might be the only message that you receive to prevent you from disaster. That's why it's so important to be in tune with yourself to the point where you could pay attention to the signs. Back in the day when you used to hear people talk about pay attention to the signs and they weren't regular churchgoers, they were considered nuts. They were considered demon worshipers. Don't fool with them. They're witches, they're warlocks and whatnot. But nowadays, looking at the state of the world, paying attention to the signs can save your life. And people are beginning to see that now. And what has happened as a result of the pandemic situation, and I was discussing this with someone the other day, it's an unfortunate situation, but something good did come out of it. And the one thing that we both agreed on was the fact that you finally had a chance to realize what was really going on in your life. You finally had a chance to really see what was going on in your house, with the people in their house, what's going on in their lives, because before you were caught up with everything going on in the world and the day-to-day that you didn't have time, or you just didn't pay attention for whatever reason. But when they started instituting things such as shutdowns and lockdowns where it limited people's mobility and they had no choice but to sit home, see what's going on in their world, then they finally realized what the truth was. And for some people, it wasn't a good thing. There are some people who have literally taken their own lives because they realized what was really going on in their home during the time that we were on lockdown and shutdown. And it's a shame. And a lot of those things that occurred could have been prevented if the people involved had just used discernment in regards to certain situations. I'm going to give you a little example and then I'm going to let you guys go. During the lockdown, shutdown, and I'm sure this affects people all over the world, the educational system was in upheaval because a lot of kids were not able to go to school. And they had to stay home and do virtual learning, or in some cases, virtual learning wasn't around at all. And a lot of parents decided they were going to go into homeschooling, and a lot of the parents themselves weren't that educated to even teach their children. So by the time they reopened and allowed for schools to be reopened again in places that allowed it, they realized how these children were woefully behind. But during the time that the children had to stay home, parents finally realized exactly where their child was academically. There were a lot of parents that thought that their children were doing okay in school and come to find out they weren't. There were a lot of parents that found out that their children were supposed to be going to school and they weren't. There were a lot of situations that came up in that regard, and that created a whole sense of wow. A lot of parents felt a lot of guilt behind that. But the thing is, okay, there's nothing wrong with feeling guilty for what you've done. Acknowledge, okay, some mistakes were made, but the time to take action is the time to take action. Some people realized that their so-called great marriage that they had, and they had to spend time with that person, and then they finally realized deep down that they really didn't even need to be married to that person. That was an eye-opening thing. Some people realized some even deeper emotional problems that existed within family members. Some deeper mental problems existed among family members because a lot of people couldn't just leave the house and go wherever they needed to go to get out of the house. They had to sit there and they had to see what was going on. And for some people, it drove them over the edge. It drove them over the edge and they're no longer here. Instead of just tackling the problem, they became so overwhelmed with the revelation of whatever it is that came out that they couldn't handle it. Discernment can save your life, people. There are people out here in droves right now, and I spoke in a previous audio about fake spiritual leaders and fake financial gurus, people that are trying to make people feel good about life and get them over to the other side while emptying their wallets, while taking up their time by creating a false sense of security into these people. This is where discernment kicks in. It is important that you are in tune with yourself, that you are in tune with your higher power so you can be able to discern the different signs that come through when situations come up. We have all run into a situation where we are in the car somewhere and we want to go somewhere, and we try to decide whether we should take the shortcut or the long way, but the long way is going to get you there late, but the shortcut is looking a little sketchy. Now, depending on who you are, you might be like, okay, I'll be a few minutes late, but at least I'll get there the right way. But then if you turn around and take the shortcut, all of a sudden you take the shortcut and you wind up either getting lost, or there might be a high crime area, or you might be the victim of a drive-by or something like that going, or something dangerous might happen to you because of a shortcut. But that split second was the only time that you had to decide which way to go. That was the only time. We got to learn to get back into trusting that. And the only way to do that is to slowly pull ourselves away from this fakeness and this material thing that's going on, to the point where we can't even trust what's going on inside of us, that we've got to go outside of ourselves to have basic questions in our lives answered. We got to take time. We got to take time, 5 minutes in the morning, to be in tune with ourselves. Pray, meditate, read, whatever it is it takes for you to get your spirit in line, on check. Because if you don't, you might not make it through the day. And I'm not saying this to scare people. I'm just telling the truth. How many times have you run into people that have turned their lives upside down, and they will sit there in conversation and tell you, boy, I wish I had listened to what that little voice told me, and that was the only sign. But because they weren't in tune to listening to that little voice, weren't in tune to understand what the signs were around them, or pay attention to what their spirit is telling them to do, because they weren't in tune, they didn't recognize that it was a warning. We got to get back to that, people. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Use discernment, but also walk in power, peace, protection, and prosperity. Have a great day.